Welcome to the Organic Matrix, the life guide in your pocket. Have you ever felt engulfed in a wave of emotion that doesn't even belong to you? Ever wish that you can navigate these overwhelming feelings with a greater sense of control and ease? If this resonates with you, we have a special treat for you. We're inviting you back to a deeper exploration of our previous conversation in today's episode of the Organic Matrix. Remember Jennifer Moore? She's back with us again to continue our journey into managing empathic overwhelm and establishing firm boundaries. Jennifer is a renowned expert known for her invaluable guidance to intuitives, lightworkers, and creatives. Together, we'll strive to answer the pressing question: how can we transform the challenges of being an empath into a superpower that fuels our personal and spiritual growth? So, buckle up for a deeper dive into this important topic. Keep this episode handy for those moments when you need support in managing empathic overwhelm. It's time for you to reclaim your power, navigate the emotional storms with confidence, and truly thrive in your journey as an empath. Are you ready? Let's delve in. Looking for career advice, personal development tips, or inspiring stories? Our Matrix Mentors has you covered. Don't miss out. Bookmark our podcast and follow us on social media for a life guide in your pocket. Jennifer, welcome back to the show.
Samantha, thank you so much for having me here and for welcoming me back. We had such a good conversation last time. I can't wait to get started and talk again.
Me too. I'm super thrilled to jump right into it. How would you define empathic overwhelm, and what are some common signs that someone may be experiencing it?
So, one of the common signs that we may be experiencing it is that if you look at your own life and you're sort of what you're feeling is not reflected in your reality. That you're feeling over a lot of times, somebody might be feeling intense anxiousness, intense sadness, intense just overwhelm, self-doubt, any number of things. And yet everything on paper looks good. Like you've got a roof over your head, you've got money in the bank account, your relationship is fine, everybody in your family and in your world is doing pretty okay. You're doing pretty okay. And yet you are just have these feelings of overwhelm and distress that you cannot shake. And so the thing is that highly sensitive, so I see empathy and being an empath as being on a spectrum. And there are people who have a capacity for empathy and can be empathetic, but they're not necessarily, they can see or sense what's going on with somebody, but they're not absorbing it. Whereas empaths are people who take on the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, and the sensations that are coming from the world around them. But unlike sort of your less extreme empath person, they process the information as if it's their own. And so they will walk into a room where maybe something has been happening before. And whereas if somebody who's maybe not as porous might go in and be like, wow, I really sense a lot of sadness in this room. The empath walks into the room and goes, why do I suddenly feel so sad? Why do I suddenly feel so upset? Why am I having such a hard time here? And the thing is that for many of us, and we kind of talked about, I think we talked a bit about just sort of the invalidation that can happen when we're children. You're too sensitive, you're overreacting, you're taking it too personally. The thing is that a lot of times we did not experience validation for what we were picking up. It was like, so we would often be like, what is wrong with me? Why am I feeling this way? It doesn't make any sense. And so what I found is that empathic overwhelm and that feeling of just like feeling just distressed and flooded very often comes with feelings of confusion, with feelings of doubt, with feelings of like, what is wrong with me? Why am I feeling this way? This doesn't compute. There's just nothing in my life that matches this. And so that is the thing that I have found over and over again is a pretty good indication that somebody is experiencing empathic overwhelm is when there is no correlation between reality and what you're feeling on the inside. I will say, though, that if somebody has a history of a lot of trauma, and especially if it's unresolved trauma, that sometimes if you've got a lot of skeletons in the closet and a lot of stuff that's sort of like never been addressed, that can get activated. And even when everything in the world and life seems fine, something, maybe you're watching a TV show and you saw something that just activated something, and all of a sudden you're sort of being brought back to old memories. This is where, if you know you've done the work, if you kind of know what's under the hood and you know what makes you tick, this is sort of where then it's much more likely that it's empathic overwhelm. So, how was that for an answer? Hopefully, that was helpful.
That makes sense to me. And when I reflect on that, I think about times where, like social anxiety, like when I'm overthinking the energy in the room, like sometimes I'll have a tendency of walking into the room and feeling like I'm being judged by somebody else.
Yes, yes, yes. So I had this realization a number of years ago. I was doing a lot of like sort of transformational entrepreneur kind of business retreats. And I noticed, like, the first day I was at one of these events, I would be like, woo, this is really fun. I'd be enjoying myself. I'd be connecting with people that I knew and I loved and just like having a blast. And by the second day, I'd start feeling kind of weird. I'd start feeling like that sense of like, fear of people judging me. I'd start feeling this sense of like I'm just like I don't have my ish together. I don't know what I'm doing, and I would start experiencing a lot of self-doubt, a lot of self-judgment, a lot of feeling uneasy and uncomfortable. And what I realized was that this was a place where there were a lot of people who were coming for information, but they were also discovering how many gaps there were between how they were running their business and how they should be running their business. And essentially within in sort of the transformational business coaching world, there's kind of a formula of you kind of introduce people, kind of the top is you sort of introduce people to information and you get them invested in it. The middle is where you start to push on the pain and push on the bruises and help people to recognize like where their gaps are and where their deficits are. And this is where people tend to be very, very, very uncomfortable. And then the next part of the formula is essentially that they are then presented with, here's a solution. I just happen to be the person who has the solution, but here's the solution. And if you sign up for my X $1,000 program, then, we'll fix this for you. So I just share that not because it's necessarily relevant to being an empath, but I do think it's really useful information for anybody who's kind of checking out the transformational healing coaching world, just to understand the formula. But anyway, so that middle point where everybody's starting to feel like, wow, I don't know what I'm doing, I would start feeling self-doubt, overwhelm, questioning myself, hitting that midpoint where everybody is sort of looking at their self, looking at their stuff and realizing that and discovering their gaps, discovering their deficits, discovering what needs to be fixed. And all of a sudden I start feeling uneasy. I start feeling social anxiety. I start feeling self judgment. I start questioning myself. I start really like all these things that I thought I worked on that. I thought I got over that. I thought I'd worked through all of that stuff. All of a sudden I'm in it. And what dawned on me after going through this more than one time was
Podcaster
that
is truly an all in one platform for podcasters. If you're interested in starting a podcast or you already have one, this is a great message for you. I had to pay separate subscriptions for transcripts, video editing, and content distribution. But Zencaster combines all of these features, saving me so much time on editing and producing. Now I can focus more on what I love the most, interviewing my amazing guests. With Zencaster's 4K video streaming and advanced AI tools, you don't need fancy equipment to get high quality recordings. Plus, it's super convenient to get captions, short clips, and transcripts all in one place, eliminating the hassle of uploading and downloading between editing multiple times. What I love the most is how Zencaster helps me monetize my podcast as well through their partner program, connecting with ads and brands for collaboration. If you're a podcaster looking to streamline your workflow and monetize your passion, I highly recommend Zencaster. Check it out today. Send us a DM or check out the description below for the link.
My experience was actually a reflection of what a lot of other people were feeling. And when I realized that some of it was certainly my old stuff, but I would say the majority of it was the amplification and the picking up on all of the tension, all of the discomfort, all of the distress, all of the anxiety that was going on there. So I think the thing is that for so many of us as highly sensitive, empathic people, and sort of the more empathic and the more sort of into that empath spectrum you go, the more susceptible you are to picking up on, especially the things that people are not acknowledging for themselves. And when it comes to being in a social gathering where everybody wants to look like they've got it together, you've got a lot of people who are sort of presenting like they know what's happening. But underneath the surface, there are all these insecurities, there are all of these doubts, there's all of these other emotions. And as empaths, we walk into those kinds of spaces and we are picking up all the things that are sort of like the storms that are kind of brewing under the surface that people don't want to own. I think that in general, while it may be uncomfortable to see, witness raw, real pain for an empath, because especially like as a young empath, we can have this experience of being like, we just see it and we feel it. But I do think that in many ways, it's much easier for an empath to be in a place where people are owning their feelings than being in places where people are pretending to be experiencing one thing and actually underneath the surface going through something completely different. And so I would actually venture to say that in addition to just like some of the classic fear of persecution. Some people have coined the term witch wound now for that idea of when maybe an ancestor, or if you believe in reincarnation, in a past life you were burned at the stake, that there can be some deep fear of being your authentic self in any kind of space where you have more than a few people gathered. That I think so. There are some legitimate reasons why we ourselves might have some social anxiety and come into things. But I also think that very often it is really amplified by empathic sensitivity, and that we're not only feeling our own social awkwardness and our own sort of adolescent or like misfit toy childhood experiences, but we're also really picking up on what's going on in that collective as well.
I resonate with that. I resonate with that deeply. What are some practical techniques or strategies individuals can use to manage and release these overwhelming emotions as an empath?
So that, I mean, that's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? And so the way that so first off, what I want to say is a couple things. One, we didn't get this way overnight. And so it's not like you're just going to like, take a pill and everything is going to be better. As my dear friend Britt Bolnick often says, it's a process, not a pill. I think it was Britt who originally said that. And so the thing is that when it comes to processing what's going on, bottom line, Empathic Mastery, which is my book which is a 5-step system to go from emotional hot mess to thriving success, starts with the first step of empathic mastery is recognize. And first, when I first started understanding the idea of recognize, I just sort of thought it was like recognizing what's mine, what's not mine. But the longer that I have been around this, the more I've come to understand that there are layers, many, many layers to the idea of recognize. And so we first, before we can even really start to address it, we have to identify ourselves as highly sensitive empathic people. We have to recognize that we are this. Because if we've been invalidated, if we've had the experience from early childhood that basically we were too sensitive, that we were overreacting, that we were making a big deal out of nothing, what happens is a lot of times that causes us to try to suppress our sensitivity, to downplay our sensitivity, but also to question our truth, to really be like, well, I must be completely wrong. I must not be picking this up. So the first step of recognize is just recognizing that we are picking things up, that it is legitimate, and that who we are and what we are is is real. And so once we understand that we are an empath or a highly sensitive empathic person, what then happens from that is then we can start living from a place of, okay, if this is true, then this, and this. And so the next step is recognizing when we're out of sorts, when we're off balance, when we are feeling off kilter, and being like, oh, I'm feeling out of sorts. And then recognizing or asking ourselves the question, is this actually mine, or am I picking things up? And so what I love to do is and this is a simple exercise, I love to put my hands over my heart. And once I know I'm feeling something, I will ask myself the question, is this mine? Now, I would say that 9.9 times out of 10, the answer is yes, and, or both and. What I will get is some of this is yours, some of this is coming from outside of you. And so once I get that answer of some of this is yours and some of this is coming out from outside of you, I will ask a second question, which is, what's mine? What's not mine? And understanding what's mine means that, okay, so for some reason, this, I'll just give a complete random example. For some reason, being at this social gathering is bringing up my experience of the birthday party that I attended when I was 6.5 years old. And everybody, like all of the little girl, and this little girl played a trick, or like this little girl ganged up, got the other girls to gang up against me and played a trick on me. This did not happen, you guys. Just saying, I'm really making something up here. And so then all of a sudden I'm at this other event, and not only am I picking up on this social anxiety that these other people are feeling about themselves, I'm also feeling anxious because, oh my God, I have this inner child who's terrified that somehow the mean girls are going to gang up against me again. So once I have that understanding of like, okay, so this is about the memory of mean girls at 6.5, and this is about other people's feelings, then it's my job to deal with the part of me that is unresolved about the mean girls at 6.5. But it's also my job to let go of and release, which is the second step of empathic mastery, release the stuff that is not mine. And so, what I really love to do is the simplest way to work with the release is to just put my hands over my heart, and using my breath, I will take in a nice deep breath and just sort of hold my breath. And then as I exhale and I release, I'll take my hands off my heart, and I'll just I'll take my hands and just kind of and offer them out and say, as I exhale, I release that which does not serve me, or I release this back to where it belongs. I send this back to where it belongs. And so just inhaling And then I send this exhaling, I send this back to where it belongs. And this is a surprisingly simple, but also surprisingly effective technique. It gets more effective the more you do it, too. So the first time you do it, you might be like, yeah, Jennifer, that really worked for me. Not. But the more you do it, the more like it's almost like you're training yourself to release this. In the same way that if you've ever used like anchoring words, like learning how to use, like, say, if you just say the word breathe or you just say the word relax, you can kind of condition your body to be able to do these things. Being able to say, I send this back to where it belongs, or I release this back to where it belongs, becomes this thing where you start to learn what you're doing. And I love incorporating the breath. So, those two pieces of recognize and release really are the very beginning steps of this. And then, in case you're curious, the three additional steps are protect, which has a lot to do with boundaries, which you and I were going to talk about, as well as energetic filters and shields, setting up more protective, like developing a more robust, strong aura of light all around us. And then the next step is connect, because the universe abhors a vacuum. And so if we do not want to keep on attracting and drawing in sort of more toxic negative energy, we need to be connecting with a power greater than ourselves, with the force of light, a force of love, a force of wonder and health. And when we are really in alignment with that divine source, or however you define it, then we are much less vulnerable and susceptible to continuing to take on all of that intensity. And then the final step of empathic mastery is act, because words without works is dead. And we need to live in a way that reinforces our empathic safety by not doing things that are going to get us into trouble. And and one of those, an example of that is many empaths are very prone to rush into rescue. And one of the reasons why we are so prone to rushing into rescue is because we feel better when other people feel better. If somebody is feeling lousy, then it is extremely likely that we're going to feel lousy because they feel lousy. And so it follows that we feel better when they feel better. And so a lot of times what happens is when we are not able to sit with our own discomfort and sit with our own feelings and just be present with our humanity, then we have a really hard time sitting with and being present with other people's humanity, with other people's intense feelings. And so we tend to want to just jump in and fix. The problem with this is that, one, often we'll do it when it is unsolicited. And two, we will also do it at the expense of somebody's lessons, at the expense of somebody finding their own way. And so, a really big part of ACT is learning how to allow people to live and do what they need to do without, for lack of a better word, meddling.
Oh, that's the biggest thing. Everybody who walks into the spiritual world, that's the biggest thing that we learn being spiritual practitioners, that we cannot interfere in what people achieve, even if it seems to be negative. Like, we all earn what we get after all. So it's like we all need to digest that karma, learn that lesson. Because if we do step in and try to fix the problem, the person that we care about is stuck in a loop and we
Well,
can
and
be there.
there's a song, a reggae song that that I think of sometimes, that I think, oh God, it was so long. I might have been. I'm not going to tell you who sang it because I'm going to screw it up. But the song was called "The Harder They Come, the Harder They Fall." And the thing is, and you've probably heard, the higher they climb, the higher they fall, or the lower they fall. And the thing is that when we intervene, when we intercede, when it's against the will of the universe, when we interfere, when we meddle, what happens is we are preventing somebody's crisis from happening when it was supposed to happen. And more often than not, what that actually means is that by the time they do have a fall, they are going to have to, it's going to be bigger, it's going to be harder, it's going to be even worse than if we had just let them hit bottom. And this is something that you can find a lot of times in addiction recovery and codependency worlds, where people are talking about it's like often enabling an alcoholic will actually bring them to a worse bottom than if you just let them wake up in their own puke. Because it's sort of like when we prevent somebody from experiencing the consequences of their choices, then they do not have to make changes. And I think that that's the thing. It's like, but there's also, I mean, this is so complicated because this has so much to do with worldview. This has so much to do with whether you believe that you are whether you believe that you are an immortal soul inhabiting a body that has lived in multiple bodies and had multiple experiences and is all on an evolutionary path. Or if you think this is not a dress rehearsal, that this is just the one thing you get, and you're born, you live, you die. I think that the sense of it's much easier to trust in that divine process and in that sort of like big karmic arc of the universe when you know that there's more to this than this one incarnation and this one body and this one life. But if all we are thinking about and seeing is just this, then it makes sense that we would want to intercede, that we would want to intervene, that we would want to prevent somebody from enduring misery, because it's kind of like if that's all they've got, then why would we want them to go through it? But if we see it in the grand scope of things as like lifetime upon lifetime of learning and understanding, and also seeing ourselves, for me, one of the big lessons I've been learning over the last couple of years and really getting at a deeper level is we are all cells in the body of this earth. We are part of a greater body. We have individual awareness of ourselves, but the thing is that we are part of something substantially greater. And our planet, that we are a cell in the body of, is also like we as a species, we as a planet are going through an evolutionary process and are learning incredibly important and incredibly powerful lessons. And ironically, so often that interceding or trying to rescue or trying to find solutions, it seems to me like it's like we keep on kind of kicking the can down the road and doubling down. Whereas if we could let things run their course, I think that a lot of times things would work themselves out a lot faster. But this really does come down to a deep sense of trust and a deep sense of trusting that there is a method to the madness of the universe. There is a divine plan, that there is, and that all is being guided by wellness, by love, and by health, even when it doesn't look like that, even when it looks like the exact opposite. And I want to tie back in that whole thing of self trust that I was kind of talking to you about even before we jumped on. The thing is that if we have been invalidated, if we have been told you're making things up, you're being too sensitive, you're overreacting, you're taking things too personally, stop, like let it go, get over it, stop thinking about it, like you're just, this is not that big a deal. If you can't trust your own inner guidance, if the needle on your own compass is being constantly moved by an external magnet and being pulled out of true north, it makes complete sense why we would also not be able to trust in that connection to something greater than ourselves, because our compass, which is our calibrating system that aligns us with that divine source, was so invalidated at such an early age, we don't necessarily have trust in it. And I think that really, really then deeply impacts our capacity to trust the flow of the universe.
Oh, I love that that was where we get to segue into establishing boundaries.
Yes.
Because when we have that invalidation and towards our psychic abilities and our intuition, when we grow up, we end up finding partners that mimic the kind of parental figures we had in the beginning. And for some reason, based off my observation, it seems like we begin dating, we lean towards the negative things that we see from our caretakers. And then as we grow to self love, we start emulating the love and acceptance part of relationships.
Yes, yes, yes. I've never, that is such a brilliant articulation. I completely agree with you. And I certainly can say that I grew up in a family of atheists. And so my early relationships were all with naysayers and skeptics and atheists, as well as very emotionally unavailable, somewhat aloof, not particularly interested. They weren't all that into me. And that was an absolute reflection of my experience. And now, many of the qualities, the positive, nurturing qualities, as I've learned to love myself, I'm able to draw on the quality, the good qualities from my childhood as opposed to the bad ones. So I couldn't agree more. I think you're right on about
Ever
that.
worried about whether your furry friends are getting the best nutrition possible? As a dedicated pet parent, I've always believed our pets deserve nothing but the best when it comes to their diet. I love my pets, and I want to make sure they live long, happy, healthy lives. That's our responsibility as a pet parent. I used to spend hours meal prepping and cooking food for my pups. But Num Num takes the problem of me hovering over that hot stove away. What sets Num Num apart is their unwavering commitment to transparency and quality. You can actually see the proteins and vegetables in their meals: beef, chicken, pork, peas, carrots, kale. It's fresh and you know exactly what your dog is eating. Isn't it time to feel great about what you're feeding your dog? Order Num Num today. Just head over to the description below and I'll be putting our promo link. And guess what? You get 50% off your first order and free shipping. Num Num food is packed with fresh proteins your dog will love. Fresh really means fresh with Num Num. You can see exactly what your dog is eating. No fillers, no weird ingredients, just wholesome, delicious meals. Your furry friend deserves the best, and with Num Num, you can get just that.
Yeah.
How they can place boundaries in their relationship.
Absolutely. So, first thing I want to throw out there, because this is a distinction about boundaries that I think is really, really, really important. Really important. I'll say that one more time. So, here's the thing. What I think a lot of people experience as boundaries is actually demands on other people. So, like, for example, when you say to somebody, I need you to stop drinking, or I need you to stop being so loud, or I need you to, you fill in the blank. What we are doing is we are externalizing our request and our boundary, and we are telling another person what we expect of them. A real boundary is actually being able to enforce or express that this is what we will tolerate, and these are the consequences of somebody's behavior if they don't continue to persist in doing this thing. So instead of saying to somebody, I need you to stop yelling right now, or I need you to, I mean, who knows? Any kind of example, but let's imagine, like, let's talk about a child. So the child is having a temper tantrum, and the child is like throwing themselves, like they're in the middle of the living room floor, or even worse, they're at the grocery store and they're just like losing it. The old school sort of quote boundary unquote is, you need to stop doing that right now, and maybe, or you're going to get a whooping. But the way that a boundary, the best kind of boundary is basically, this is my request, like this is what I prefer, this is what I want, but if you continue to do this, then I am going to do this. So it's sort of like if you continue to have a temper tantrum in the middle of the grocery store floor, I am going to pick you up and we are going to leave right now. Or say you got a kid at the movie theater and they're losing it at the movie theater. If you continue to do this, I am going to pick you up and we are going to leave right now. If you do this, then I will. So there is a consequence. So instead of it being, I'm demanding that you change your behavior, it's these are my boundaries with this behavior, and this is the consequence if you persist. So, for example, if somebody was in a relationship with somebody who had an alcohol problem or a drug problem, instead of saying, I need you to stop drinking, what the boundary would be, I am uncomfortable with the amount of alcohol that you are drinking. And if you continue to drink, I am going to need to make changes and I will leave. Like, so that there's like, or I will exit. I'm going to find a ride. I'm going to call a friend and get a ride home. You can figure it out. If you continue to drink, I'm going to take your keys. And like, so that there's more of a, if this, then this, as opposed to just a demand. To me, this is like one of the most important things about understanding boundaries is that it's about what will we tolerate and what will we do if the person continues to persist in that behavior. So another kind of boundary, which it feels like this is where the empath as the people pleaser really gets themselves into a lot of trouble, because here's the thing, this was something I realized is that highly empaths, if you just sort of take it for granted that empaths feel other people's feelings, then one of the reasons why an empath will allow other people to, will oblige requests that they don't want to do, but also will do this thing where they will allow another person to win, is because empaths will often feel worse if if that person does not get their way. So like I was working with somebody a couple weeks ago and we had this revelation where they were always letting other people win, because what we realized was that it's actually more uncomfortable to be the winner and feel that other person's disappointment and resentment than it is to be an empath who is feeling who is to be an empath who is feeling the elation of the other person's winning. So like the empath, if the empath wins, it's like kind of a, they might be excited or happy for a second, but the thing is that because that other person is so bummed out about losing, it kind of completely yucks the yum for the empath. Like the empath is like, yeah, I won, but I'm feeling this person's misery. Whereas if the other person wins, the empath gets the contact high off of that winning. And therefore, it's like the other person is winning. There's no disappointment. And the empath gets to ride the vibe of that other person winning. And when it comes to this thing of if somebody's making a request, if you think of it as kind of like a win, that person answering or respecting that request means they won. What it means is that whenever we respond to or are people pleasing and doing the thing, there's a part of us that is getting the contact high and the satisfaction that is coming from that other person. Whereas when we say no to that person or those people, we feel and pick up on the disappointment. Now, sometimes this is completely projected. Sometimes somebody really doesn't care. Right now, I really overextended myself over the course of the last week and a half. And there's a gathering happening tomorrow night that I'm going to bow out of. And I'm projecting all over it. I'm just imagining like that I'm going to get incredible amounts of disappointment. Truth is, I know these people, they are probably going to be like, no problem. We love you. Do your thing. But I'm just noticing that part of me that is not actually picking up on real disappointment, but is picking up on imagined disappointment. So, speaking about this idea of being sensitive to the either real or imagined disappointment, as empaths, that really impacts our ability to say no. because we will often, often, often agree to do things that we do not want to do. The problem with this is that if we are not respecting our internal boundaries, if we're not respecting our aligned truth, then what I guarantee you will happen is that your spirit, your soul, your psyche, your body will set boundaries for you because you couldn't set them for yourself. And so, in terms of the way that it tends to work, it tends to start with you do something against your will, you do something that is not in alignment for you. You say yes when you wanted to say no. And the first step is usually that you just feel out of sorts, you feel resentful, you feel frustrated. But then after that, the next step for the universe throwing of agents of support at you when you can't support yourself is that the next step could be something like suddenly a situation comes up, a problem or a challenge comes up, you lock yourself out of your car, you run out of gas, you lose your keys in the house and you can't find them anywhere. You have some kind of a situation where the computer breaks down or something happens, like a physical accident or some kind of challenge occurs that's going to basically inhibit that ability to do this. Then the next level is when suddenly things start to actually like go really wrong. Like you start having, like you get into a car accident, or maybe you are like you sprain your ankle or you injure yourself. And that's sort of when like we're really not listening and we're not respecting our boundaries. And then finally, what I've seen is that sort of the worst case scenario, and this is usually after you've been denying your boundaries for a really long time, it manifests as health issues. And the degree of health issues, whether it's like you get a cold, that's kind of a temporary, yeah, you overdid it, you need to pull back. But one, we're talking about something chronic, like maybe fibromyalgia or an autoimmune disease, or even worse, like chronic heart issues or diabetes or cancer. Then, once we start talking about the more extreme it gets, the more chronic the issue has been, and the longer you've been denying your boundaries, the longer you have been ignoring your boundaries to the point where your body is like, okay, fine, I'm just going to pull the plug on you because you are not respecting your boundaries. You are not respecting me. And I think part of the challenge is learning how to say no. One of the things I've noticed for empaths is that, and I think this is true for many people, but especially for empaths, is that we very often will feel like we have to make excuses and explain why we have a no. And the thing is that explanations and whys tend to generate negotiation and people looking for solutions. Whereas if you just simply say, that sounds wonderful. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do that today. Or, oh, that sounds awesome. I already have plans. Or, I'd love to, but I already have responsibilities. Or, that's just not, or even really simply, thank you so much. That's not going to work for me. When you make a declarative statement, this is just my truth. Thank you. No, or no thank you. Like I think you've probably heard the saying, no is a no is a sentence. When you can just be solid in that no, then you're not going to get that pushback with it. Whereas when we get into that, well, I can't do it because this, and this, that's when we will get people trying to look for solutions because we're wavering. And so the most important part of that boundary around the no of what feels aligned to us is being really clear instead of being in that wobbly, wavering, like kind of showing our underbelly of discomfort around the saying no. So if there's anything I would suggest and really offer to your audience is how incredibly important it is to rehearse saying no in a dry, firm, and like really um unambivalent way. Like no wobble, just thank you so much. That's not going to work for me. No, thank you. I really appreciate it. No, thank you. And just really getting comfortable with that. And I will say that I feel like a complete work in progress with this because there are places where I'm really comfortable with, no, thank you. Can't do that for you. I'm not the appropriate person for this. Here, why don't you go look here? And then there are other places where I will really be backpedaling. I will really be making excuses. I will really be going into like even with this whole situation, I really overextended myself. I'm really starting to feel crispy. I'm starting to feel sick. Part of that is just letting my friend know where I'm at. But the other side of it is I need to justify my sovereignty. I need to justify my decision. And because God forbid I disappoint somebody by not coming to the party. And I mean, I will say, I think there's also a certain amount of like, we all as human beings, I think we regard us, it's sort of funny. I think on one hand, we do not realize how important and precious and valuable and significant we are. Like we don't know how much we matter. But on the other side, I think we also inflate our importance to the point where we really are like, like whether I show up at this party or not, it's not going to matter. It's just not going to matter in the grand scheme of things. They are going to go on without me and they're going to have a wonderful time and they're going to have fun. And I will get it. What is it? The opposite of FOMO is what was it? Like there is something, I can't remember the words for it, but it's like the opposite of FOMO is like like the pleasure of missing out, like the gratitude that you're like, I didn't have to do that. And so I will get to chill out. I will get to I probably get to sleep a little bit earlier, and I will get to like, I won't overextend myself.
Oh, I love that. I think it's so important to practice no and to rehearse it. Like you're totally right. And it's the biggest way that we get to step into our power to really learn how to avoid burnout, really, because that's exactly how burnout starts. We start when we feel resistance and we ignore it. And the resistance is there
Exactly.
to speak to us.
Well, and there's so many excuses. There's so many yeah buts that are going to come up like when we feel ourselves in misalignment. There are so often all of the, well, I couldn't possibly because, and like we get the we sort of see the smoke signals. We get the sense. And also, I will also say that sometimes we will see things, but the universe is like setting things up to be in place so that we are ready to make the move. And that's the thing. Like sometimes something is uncomfortable and we're in it so that we can outgrow it. But just because we know we're outgrowing it does not mean that right then and there is the time to walk away from this. And I see this actually a lot where people are going from working for an organization or working in corporate or being salaried or being employed by somebody else to going over to being self employed. A lot of time people will start getting the message and start feeling the urge to create something for themselves, to do trainings, to go in a different direction, like they can feel it. And sometimes you'll start having the experience of things being out of alignment or misaligned, where maybe you're starting to notice that your boss is more of a jerk than you realized before. But it's not time to leave. And what I've noticed a lot of times when people, especially with pursuing like self-employment or going for their dreams and becoming an entrepreneur, is that sometimes people will jump the gun and will be like, I'm going to leave this now because I know that that's what's the writing on the wall. But they have not gotten things in place. They have not set things up, because this is where I think the intersection between the illusion, like in spirit, there's no such thing as time. And so you'll get the download of this is misaligned for you and there's something better for you. But in this 3D reality, or even more so 3D and 4D reality. Once we start getting into 5D, it's easier to kind of move timelines and play with stuff. But when we're talking about like the 3D reality of the human body, the concrete physical experience that we have here, sometimes things take time and we will see an inclination of what we need to shift years before we can fully make the transition, that we need to leverage our way through it, and we need to, and that I've seen enough people, especially with like self-employment, where they take a leap of faith and they expect their infant business to basically support them when they were leaving like a 20-year old, like an adult career that had been supporting them for years, that they got to develop their chops. And I see a lot of expectation, like people really like putting a lot of burden on the leap, because they leapt, like sort of that old idea of like, leap in the, like it's like leap and the wings appear, leap and the bridge appears. Sometimes you leap at the wrong time and you do fall on your face. And so I do think that that sense of instinctually knowing, is this the time, like I know this is misaligned, but is this when I take action? Or is this, or actually it's, yes, we're always taking action, but it's like, am I taking, like am I putting like, am I going from step A to step like X without any of the things in between? And I'll give you an example. I started getting a sense that the work that I was doing, because I was working as a tattooer, doing it as a healing art for 20 years. And I had a like thriving business. I had a business that was like, it would have been stupid to leave it. I was booked out 6 to 8 months in advance. We were an award winning studio. I had people coming from all over the country, sometimes people coming from Europe and other places to work with me. And my business was really amazing. And at a certain point, I started getting these flashes from spirit that it was going to be time to leave, that I was going to need to do something different. I had no idea what it was going to be, other than that it was probably going to be involving a lot more teaching and a lot more group work, and being able to share this message with a much brighter audience than just working individually one on one with people. And so I started getting this message probably like 2011, 2012, 2013. And I started to train in additional modalities. I started to train to become an EFT practitioner. And then around 2014, a conflict arose that was really intense, but was really like, this is becoming really misaligned. This setting is becoming misaligned. I'm going to have to step away from it. But I also had a 3-year lease that I was obliged to, that I was bound to. And I also knew that I was going to have to leverage my way out of a thriving business into creating something that was sustainable, that was viable, that could actually support me. And so I spent from the August of 2014 to winter solstice Yule of 2017, leveraging my way out and taking one step after another, after another, after another, after another, including like building a space, talking to insurance agents, working with the, like working with like town and state officials, um, starting my book. Like I started working on my book in 2000. I started really working on my book in like 2000 and early 2016. And all of these things that I kept on working on and preparing and just taking one action after the next, so that eventually at the winter solstice of 2017, I stepped away from this thing that I was no longer aligned with. But there was a period of time, and I think people often think that if you know you need to set a boundary, it goes from misalignment, boundary, boom. Like there's just no gap in between. And what I would say is that in my personal experience, misalignment is the first, like recognizing this misalignment is often the first step. And then there's a lot of incremental steps between the recognizing of the misalignment and the life that you want to live.
Absolutely. How do your services help highly sensitive, intuitive humans navigate the challenges of empathic overwhelm? Because I bet a lot of our empaths, our Matrix members, can relate to what you mentioned.
So what I really, really love to do, I believe I live by the saying, okay, you can't read the label from the inside of the jar. And so a lot of what I really love to do is connect with people, meet them where they are, and help them to read the label, like to be able to understand what's going on. But a lot of time, I actually work with the 5 steps of empathic mastery. So the first step is, depending on where somebody's at, just helping them to recognize what they are, who they are, where they're at, what is going on, what is underneath the hood, and also to help them to regulate their nervous system, to help them to find a place of grace and calmness. Because for so many of us as highly sensitive empathic people, we don't even know what it feels like to not be in a state of distress. So, a lot of times, depending on how distressed somebody is when they first start to work with me, my first goal is to just give you tools for grounding, to just give you tools for regulating your nervous system, for being able to like get out of fight, flight, freeze, or flop or fawn, and to be able to be in a place where you start to be able to have access to your healthy, functioning frontal cortex of your brain instead of being in that reactive. So, the first step of the work that I love to do with people is to help them to go from reacting to responding and recognizing the impact of things that are going on. Then, what I do using a lot of different kinds of tools that I've got in my toolbox, EFT for is one of my favorite tools, but also like doing a lot of energy healing work, a lot of angelic intercession work, ancestral release work, just psychic calibration. A lot of times, like even this conversation that we are having right now, listening to like truth to what it is to be an empath can help us to recalibrate away from the idea that we were too sensitive, that we were overreacting, that we were taking things too personally. And so I use a lot of different tools to help people to release the stuff that is no longer serving them and also to recalibrate so that then they can start asking themselves the question of, what do I want? What is right for me? And then we work with that boundary, the protect, of building up the filters and shields, of creating a robust system, of understanding what are the strategic as well as energetic boundaries that we need to put in place. And from that, then really starting to, instead of being kind of focused on like scarcity, lack, and kind of that, the illusion of the void and the illusion of that 3D reality of like, this is all you got. You're born and then you die. To be able to be connected to the light, to be connected to the love, to be connected to the hope, to be connected to the possibility. And then from that connection, when we are in alignment, when we are aware of the fact that we are a cell in the body of this earth, which is a cell in the body of this solar system, which is a cell in the body of this galaxy, which is a cell in the body of the universe, which is a cell in the body of the multiverse. Once we understand our place in things and we can really feel that connection, then we start to understand that like this human experience in this little tiny body is like a fraction, it's not even 1% of reality that we are part of and that we are. And once we are connected to that, then how we act in the world, what actions we take, how we fulfill our purpose in the world gets to become completely different. And so I work with people working with the 5 steps of empathic mastery: recognize, release, protect, connect, and act, sort of within sort of in the immediate, but then also in the midterm, or the, sort of like over the, like more like looking at it kind of like in regards to something kind of midway, and then also as an entire way of living and a philosophy that sort of extends out over time. And I do this in a number of different ways. I do private one on one work with people, and I offer both. I had for many years just only been doing like VIP pack programs, but I've recently been offering or opening up to doing single sessions with people with just sort of empathic mastery and fairy godmother support, just doing this kind of magical work together. But I will say that nearly everybody who is a private client of mine works with me for a year. They come in, they're mine. I'm theirs, they're mine. I'm their fairy godmother. I take them in under my wing. I love them. I support them. I help them. I guide them. I also offer group support where we do a lot of workshopping and learning tools and techniques. And I also teach people how to use these tools so that they can learn to use them for themselves. And then in addition to that, I have, the books that I've written, the podcasts that I host, the master classes that I host the free master classes that I host in my free Facebook group every single month, Tap Along Tuesdays that I host in my free Facebook group, and just all as well as like tap along videos on YouTube and everything, because I feel very strongly that I want this information to be available regardless of what somebody's price point is. So, like, I offer, like, I have things that people can get for free. I have a book that you can buy a Kindle copy for $9.99 that is 380 pages of how to do this work. And then I've got group programs that are, like in the like sort of high hundreds, and then I've got one-on-one private stuff that depending on how long somebody works with me, we can be talking about 4 or 5 figures. But I'm very committed to and very aware that what's most important is that we offer support, or that I offer support in a way that allows people at any given point. Because that's one thing I do see sometimes in, especially that's happened in the coaching world, is that you get all these people who are just offering high ticket stuff, and they're not really offering solutions when people are really like, some people, like, if you're just in total empath, one of the symptoms of extreme empathic overwhelm is often either bad relationship distress or severe or extreme financial distress. This isn't true for every single empath, but a lot of empaths, their empathic overwhelm will manifest as like financial worries. And so I think it's incredibly important to start giving people tools for self regulating and for really being able to navigate and start understanding the impact of being an empath in a way that allows them to sort of pull themselves out of the weeds, even when going and doing private sessions with somebody is not a viable option yet. So hopefully that was a clear enough answer, and not all, because there's obviously, as you can see, I offer a lot of tiers of support.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I feel like I've learned a lot of different ways that we can approach our emotional overwhelm as empaths. And I really appreciate you coming onto the show again and teaching our Matrix members.
Oh, Samantha, thank you so much for having me on the show. It just is such a pleasure to be with you. You are just such a being. Your soul, you are such a being of light, and your heart is just, it's such a pleasure to dance with your heart. So thank you, thank you, thank you for having me here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this transformative journey with Jennifer Moore. As we delve into the realm of empathic overwhelm and establishing boundaries, we hope you've gained some valuable insights and practical techniques to navigate the storms of emotional intensity and protect your energy as an empath. Remember to bookmark this episode so you can revisit it whenever you need guidance and support in this area. Jennifer's expertise, gained through years of experience, and her Empathic Mastery book offers a powerful resource for highly sensitive individuals like you. To learn more about Jennifer and her work, visit her website, empathicmastery.com. There you'll find a wealth of resources, including her best-selling book, Empathic Mastery, and her podcast, The Empathic Mastery Show. And if you're on TikTok, check out the Empathic Fairy Godmother. I have her on my favorites. Jennifer has created an empowering ebook called The Empathic Safety Guide: 3 Basics for Finding Calm in the Eye of the Storm. Download your copy at empathicsensitivity.com to access practical tools that can bring you immediate relief and support on your empathic journey. We invite you to share this episode with others who may benefit from Jennifer's wisdom and support. Together, let's empower more empaths to reclaim their inner strength, find balance, and embrace their unique gifts as they journey through the Matrix. Stay connected with us by following the Organic Matrix on social media and subscribing to our podcast. Your feedback and engagement means the world to us. Feel free to tag us in a post and share your thoughts on this episode. Thank you for being a part of our Matrix member community, and together we can create a world where empathic souls thrive and shine their light to make a positive impact.